Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. Your support helps me bring you more powerful life stories that truly touch the heart. Thank you for being here. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban street as Irene's old Honda pulled into the driveway of their modest two-story home. She sat in the car for a moment, letting out a deep sigh that seemed to carry the weight of another exhausting day at the insurance office. The digital clock on the dashboard read 6:47 p.m., later than usual, thanks to an emergency meeting that had dragged on for hours. She gathered her purse and briefcase from the passenger seat, her movements slow and deliberate. At 34, Irene felt older than her years. The responsibilities of single motherhood had aged her, though she'd found some relief when Eric came into their lives 2 years ago. Or so she had thought. The front door key stuck slightly in the lock, as it always did during humid weather. She made a mental note to ask Eric to look at it. He was handy with those kinds of things. That was one of the things that had drawn her to him initially, his willingness to help, to fix things that were broken. "Alex, honey, where are you?" she called out as she slipped off her black work heels, feeling immediate relief as her tired feet touched the cool hardwood floor. The house felt unusually quiet. Normally, she'd hear the sound of cartoons from the living room, or Alex would come running to greet her, full of stories about his day at school. Instead, silence greeted her. She set her briefcase down by the small table near the entrance and walked through the living room. The television was off, Alex's backpack was thrown carelessly by the couch, and his sneakers were kicked off haphazardly near the stairs, clear signs he'd been home. But where was he now? In the kitchen, she found her answer. On the wooden table, next to a half-empty glass of milk and some cookie crumbs, lay a piece of notebook paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Alex's, large, uneven letters written in blue crayon. "Mom, I'm in my room. I don't want dinner." Irene's heart skipped a beat. In 7 years of raising Alex, she'd never known him to refuse food. He was a growing boy with an appetite that seemed bottomless. Last week, he'd eaten 3 helpings of her homemade spaghetti and still asked for a bedtime snack. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under her weight. The house was old, built in the 1960s, and every board seemed to have its own voice. As she reached the second-floor landing, she could hear a faint sound coming from Alex's room. Soft, muffled sobs that made her chest tighten with maternal worry. "Alex, sweetheart, can I come in?" she asked softly, knocking gently on his bedroom door. The door was painted a cheerful blue. They'd done it together last spring, making a mess of themselves and the drop cloths in the process. It had been a happy day. No response came from within. "I'm coming in, honey." She turned the handle slowly, pushing the door open with careful deliberation. The room was bathed in the soft, gray light of early evening. Alex's curtains, covered with cartoon dinosaurs, were drawn, but enough light seeped through to illuminate the small figure huddled on the twin bed. Alex was curled up in a tight ball, his face buried in his knees, his small shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "Oh, baby, what's wrong?" Irene rushed to his side, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Why are you crying?" Alex lifted his head, just enough for her to see his face. His eyes were red and swollen, his cheeks streaked with tears. The sight broke her heart. "I can't tell you," he whispered, his voice so small she had to lean closer to hear him. "You know you can tell me anything, sweetheart," she said, reaching out to stroke his dark hair that was exactly the same shade as hers. "We'll face it together, whatever it is." But Alex shook his head violently, his face scrunching up with fear. "I can't. He'll kill me if I say." The words hit Irene like a physical blow. Who's threatening you, Alex?" Her son buried his face back into his knees, his body trembling. "No one. Forget it. Please, just forget it." Irene felt panic rising in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She gently cupped Alex's face in her hands, tilting it up so she could look into his eyes. "Honey, look at me. No one, and I mean no one, will hurt you. I'm your mom, and I'll always protect you. Please, tell me what's happening." For a long moment, Alex stared at her with those wide, terrified eyes. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "It's Eric." The name hit her like a punch to the stomach. Eric, her boyfriend of 2 years. The man she'd been thinking about marrying. The man who'd brought stability and joy back into their lives after Alex's father had abandoned them. What are you saying? What did Eric do to you? He hurts me, Alex said, the words tumbling out now like water through a broken dam. When you're not home. He hurts me. Irene's world tilted on its axis. That can't be true, she gasped, shaking her head automatically. Eric loves you, Alex. He's always so good to you. There must be some mistake. It's not a mistake. Alex suddenly screamed, his voice cracking with emotion. You never believed me. That's why I didn't want to say anything. He pulled away from her and crawled under his blanket, turning his back to her. Irene sat on the floor beside his bed, clutching her head in her hands, trying to process what she'd just heard. Her mind raced, searching for alternative explanations, for reasons why this couldn't be true. Eric was kind. Eric was patient. Eric had fixed Alex's broken bicycle without being asked. Eric helped with homework. Eric tucked Alex in at night when she worked late shifts. But as she sat there in the gathering darkness of her son's bedroom, memories began to surface. Little things she dismissed or explained away. The way Alex had become quieter over the past few months. How he no longer ran to greet Eric when he came home from work. The nightmares that had started about 6 months ago. The way Alex sometimes flinched when Eric reached out to ruffle his hair. God, how had she been so blind? An hour later, Irene heard Eric's key in the front door. Honey, I'm home. His cheerful voice echoed through the hallway, just like every other evening for the past 2 years. The sound that had once brought her comfort now made her stomach churn. She had spent the last hour sitting with Alex, trying to get more details, but he'd clammed up completely after his outburst. All she'd managed to extract was that whatever Eric was doing, it happened when she wasn't home, and that Eric had threatened him to keep it secret. Now she forced herself to walk downstairs, to appear normal, even though every instinct screamed at her to grab Alex and run. Eric was hanging his jacket in the small closet near the front door. At 38, he was tall and lean, with sandy brown hair that was beginning to thin at the temples. He worked construction and always came home with a slight smell of sawdust and honest sweat. His face lit up when he saw her, just as it always did. Hey, beautiful, he said, moving toward her for their usual welcome home kiss. Irene instinctively stepped back and immediately saw his expression change. The smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something watchful. Something wrong? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. No, just had a really hard day at work, she lied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Difficult client. You know how it is. Eric nodded sympathetically, but she noticed he was studying her face intently. Wanting to order some pizza? You don't have to cook tonight. The offer was typical Eric, always thinking of others, always trying to help. But now it felt calculated somehow, as if he was performing kindness rather than feeling it. I'm not really hungry, she said. I think I'll just go to bed early. Where's Alex? Eric asked, and Irene's heart nearly stopped. I picked up that new video game he's been wanting. Thought I'd surprise him. He's asleep, she said quickly. Not feeling well. Came down with something at school. Should I go check on him? Eric took a step toward the stairs, and every maternal instinct Irene possessed roared to life. No! The word came out sharper than she'd intended, and Eric stopped, looking at her with surprise and something else. Was it annoyance? She forced a shaky smile. I mean, better let him rest. You can give it to him tomorrow. Without waiting for a response, she fled upstairs, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. The following days passed in a surreal haze of suspicion and dread. Irene found herself watching every interaction between Eric and Alex with the intensity of a detective. She made excuses to work from home, claiming she needed to catch up on paperwork. She rearranged her schedule to minimize the time Eric and Alex spent alone together. On the surface, Eric appeared to be the same loving, patient man she'd fallen for. He helped Alex with his math homework at the kitchen table, making encouraging comments and explaining problems with infinite patience. He played catch with him in the backyard after dinner, cheering when Alex managed to catch a particularly difficult throw. He even suggested they all go to the county fair the following weekend, a suggestion that would have thrilled Alex just a few months ago. But now Alex barely responded to Eric's attempts at interaction. The boy who had once chattered excitedly about his day at school now answered Eric's questions with monosyllables. He no longer asked Eric to read him bedtime stories or help him with his model airplane. Instead, he seemed to shrink whenever Eric entered a room, finding excuses to leave or positioning himself as far away as possible. Most tellingly, Alex had stopped eating properly. Irene noticed he pushed his food around his plate during dinner, claiming he wasn't hungry, only to sneak down to the kitchen late at night to grab crackers or fruit when Eric wasn't around. The nightmares had gotten worse too. Twice in the past week, Irene had been awakened by Alex's screaming. When she rushed to his room, she found him sitting up in bed, drenched in sweat, crying about monsters that wanted to hurt him. When she asked what the monsters looked like, he just shook his head and asked if he could sleep in her room. Eric, for his part, seemed increasingly frustrated by Alex's behavior, though he hid it well. Irene caught fleeting expressions crossing his face. Annoyance when Alex ignored a direct question, anger when the boy refused to participate in activities they'd once enjoyed together. But these micro-expressions were quickly replaced by concerned puzzlement. "I don't know what's gotten into him lately," Eric said one evening as they watched Alex pick at his dinner. "Maybe he's having problems at school? Kids that age can be cruel sometimes." "Maybe," Irene replied non-committally, but inside she was screaming. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Eric had offered to help Alex with a school project, a diorama about the solar system that was due the next day. It should have been a perfect opportunity for bonding, the kind of activity Eric typically excelled at. Instead, Alex became increasingly agitated as Eric tried to help him position the planets. "No, that's not right," Alex said, his voice rising with panic when Eric reached across him to adjust Mars. "Jupiter goes here, not there." "Buddy, I'm just trying to help," Eric said, his voice still patient, but with an edge Irene had never heard before. "See? The instruction sheet says." "Don't touch it," Alex screamed, knocking over the entire display. Styrofoam planets scattered across the kitchen table and floor. "I can do it myself." He ran from the room, leaving Eric and Irene staring at the mess. "What the hell was that about?" Eric asked, and for just a moment, his mask slipped completely. His voice was cold, angry, nothing like the gentleman she thought she knew. Then he seemed to catch himself. "I mean, I don't understand what I did wrong. I was just trying to help." That night, after Eric had gone to sleep, Irene crept into Alex's room. He was lying awake, staring at the ceiling. "Sweetheart, we need to talk," she whispered. "About what you told me. About Eric." Alex turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the dim light from the hallway. "You promise you won't be mad at me? I could never be mad at you for telling me the truth." He sat up slowly, drawing his knees to his chest. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it, he began to tell her everything. "It started maybe 6 months ago," Alex began, his voice shaking. "You remember when you had to start working those Saturday shifts?" Irene nodded. The insurance company had been short-staffed, and she'd volunteered for weekend work to earn overtime pay. Eric had been supportive, saying he'd love to spend more time bonding with Alex. "The first time, he said we were going to play a special game," Alex continued. "He said it was a secret game that only grown-ups and kids who really trusted each other could play." Irene felt bile rise in her throat, but she forced herself to remain calm, to let Alex tell his story. He said it was normal, that all dads played games like this with their kids, but it had to be our secret because other people wouldn't understand how special it was. Alex's words came in halting bursts, interrupted by long pauses where he seemed to struggle to find the courage to continue. He told her about the touching games that made him feel sick and scared. He described how Eric had gradually escalated his behavior, always framing it as normal, as something that showed how much he cared about Alex. "He takes pictures sometimes," Alex whispered, and Irene's heart nearly stopped. "He has a camera, and he says the pictures are just for us to remember our special times. But I hate it. I hate all of it. Why didn't you tell me sooner, baby?" Irene asked, though she was beginning to understand. "He said if I told you, you'd think I was lying. He said you loved him more than me now, and if I ruined things, you'd send me away to live with strangers. Alex's voice broke. He said it would be my fault if our family broke apart, and you'd never forgive me. Tears were streaming down Irene's face now, but she wiped them away quickly. Alex needed her to be strong. And then Alex continued, when I tried to say no, when I said I didn't want to play the games anymore, he got scary. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I disappeared and no one would ever find me. He said he knew people who could make kids vanish forever. The last words came out as a sob, and Irene pulled her son into her arms, holding him as tightly as she dared. I'm so sorry, she whispered into his hair. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. Are you going to send me away? Alex asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Never, she said fiercely. I'm never letting you go. We're going to get through this together, I promise. But even as she made the promise, Irene's mind was racing. What could she do? If she confronted Eric directly, he'd deny everything. It would be his word against the 7-year-olds. She needed proof, evidence that would be impossible to dispute. And she needed to keep Alex safe in the meantime. The next morning, Irene called in sick to work. Instead, she drove to her best friend Anna's house. Alex beside her in the passenger seat, clutching a hastily packed overnight bag. Anna Rodriguez had been Irene's friend since college. A social worker by profession and a fierce advocate by nature, she listened to Irene's story with growing horror and rage. That monster, Anna said, pacing around her small living room while Alex played with her cat in the next room. We need to call the police right now. With what evidence? Irene asked. Alex's testimony? You know how these cases go. Eric's a respected member of the community. He coaches Little League on weekends. Everyone thinks he's wonderful. There might be physical evidence, Anna suggested. Maybe, but would that be enough? And what if there isn't any? What if Alex has to go through a traumatic examination for nothing? What if Eric gets away with it and we've shown our hand? Anna sat down heavily in her armchair. So what are you thinking? I need to catch him in the act. Or at least get him to admit it somehow. That's incredibly dangerous, Irene. If he's capable of abusing a child, who knows what else he might do if he feels cornered? I know, but what choice do I have? I can't let him hurt Alex again, and I can't let him walk away and potentially hurt other children. They spent the day formulating a plan. Anna would keep Alex safe at her house while Irene returned home to act as if everything was normal. She would tell Eric that Alex was staying at a friend's house for the weekend, something that happened occasionally and wouldn't seem suspicious. That evening, Irene called Eric from Anna's house. Hey, honey, she said, forcing cheerfulness in her voice. I'm at Anna's. Alex is having a sleepover with her nephew this weekend, and Anna and I decided to have a girls' night. You don't mind, do you? Of course not, Eric replied, though she detected something in his voice. Disappointment? I was hoping we could all go to that new family restaurant tomorrow, but we can do it next weekend. That sounds great, she lied. I'll be home Sunday evening. But Irene had no intention of staying away all weekend. Her plan was much more dangerous than she'd let Anna know. Saturday evening, after making sure Eric's truck was parked in their driveway, Irene let herself quietly into the house through the back door. She'd given Anna a spare key months ago, but she still had her own set. Eric didn't expect her home until Sunday, so he had no reason to be cautious. The house was dark except for the flickering glow of the television in the living room. She could hear the sound of a football game. Eric was a devoted fan and often spent Saturday nights watching games with a beer. Moving as quietly as possible, Irene crept upstairs to Alex's room. Her hands shook as she positioned herself under his bed, her phone ready to record. The space was cramped and dusty, and she had to bite her tongue to keep from sneezing. What if Eric didn't come? What if she was wrong about everything? What if? The sound of footsteps on the stairs cut off her worried thoughts. They were slow, deliberate, and definitely heading toward Alex's room. The door opened, and Eric's voice filled the dark room. Alex, are you asleep, buddy? There was a pause. Then Eric continued, apparently not expecting an answer. I know you're not here tonight, but I wanted to come see your room anyway. I miss our special time together. His voice had changed, become softer, more intimate. Tomorrow, when you come back, we'll have to make up for lost time. I have some new games I want to try with you. Irene's stomach clenched with revulsion. but she forced herself to keep recording. She heard Eric moving around the room, and then the sound of his closet door opening. "Let me just check on our photo collection," he murmured. "So many good memories." That was it. That was the confession she needed. Eric was admitting to having photographs, to having special time with her son. It might not be enough for a conviction, but it was certainly enough to start an investigation. But then Eric's voice changed, became suspicious. "That's strange. Some of these photos are missing." There was a long pause then, and this camera, the memory card is gone. Irene's blood ran cold. Had Alex somehow taken evidence? Had Eric discovered something was wrong? "Very strange," Eric repeated, his voice now cold and calculating. "I wonder." Suddenly, the overhead light snapped on, flooding the room with harsh illumination. Irene blinked, temporarily blinded. "I wonder if someone's been snooping around where they shouldn't be." To her horror, Eric knelt down and looked directly under the bed, his eyes meeting hers with a smile that was nothing like the warm, gentle expression she'd thought she knew. "Hello, Irene," he said calmly. "I thought I heard someone in the house." Irene scrambled out from under the bed, her phone still clutched in her shaking hands. Eric stood up slowly, blocking her path to the door. He was no longer the man she thought she'd fallen in love with. His face was calm, almost serene, but his eyes were cold as winter ice. "Did you really think I was stupid?" he asked conversationally. "Did you think I wouldn't notice that Alex suddenly became withdrawn? That you started hovering around whenever I was near him? That you've been working from home all week? Stay away from me," Irene said, backing toward the window. "I have everything recorded. I heard you admit to having photos." Eric laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Photos of what? Playing games? Spending time together? Any jury would need to see actual evidence, Irene, and that evidence is very well hidden. The police will find it. Will they? Do you really want to put Alex through that? Do you want him to have to testify in court to describe everything in detail in front of strangers? Do you want his name in the newspapers, his face on television?" Irene felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Eric was right about one thing. Prosecuting child abuse cases was notoriously difficult, and the process could be almost as traumatic for the victim as the original abuse. "You're sick," she whispered. "I'm practical," Eric corrected. "I have something you want. Alex's continued safety and privacy. You have something I want, your silence. We can make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "You pack up and leave. Tonight. Take Alex and go somewhere far away. I'll even give you money to help you get started. In exchange, you never contact the police, never try to press charges. Alex gets to heal privately, away from all this, and I get to move on with my life. So you can hurt other children?" Eric's expression didn't change. "That's not your concern anymore." "Like hell it isn't." Irene's fear was being overwhelmed by a rage unlike anything she'd ever experienced. "You think I'm going to let you walk away? You think I'm going to let you continue being a predator?" "I think you're going to be smart," Eric said, his voice hardening, "because the alternative is much worse for everyone." He took a step toward her, and Irene raised her phone. "I'm calling 911 right now." "No," Eric said, lunging forward. "You're not." They struggled for the phone, Eric's superior strength quickly becoming apparent. But as they grappled, Irene's hand closed around the small bedside lamp, a ceramic dinosaur Alex had picked out himself. Without thinking, she swung it as hard as she could. The lamp connected with Eric's temple with a sickening crack. He stumbled backward, his eyes wide with surprise, and then tumbled down the stairs. Irene stood at the top of the landing, breathing heavily, the broken lamp still in her hands. Below, Eric lay motionless at the bottom of the stairs, his neck bent at an unnatural angle. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" I think I just killed someone," she whispered. The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. Police officers, paramedics, and investigators filled the small house, transforming it into a crime scene. Eric wasn't dead, though he was unconscious and seriously injured. As the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, one of them mentioned possible spinal injuries. Whether he would walk again was unclear. Detective Olivia King, A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor sat with Irene at the kitchen table while technicians processed Alex's bedroom. "I want you to tell me everything from the beginning," Detective King said. "And I mean everything. The smallest detail might be important." Irene told her story, starting with Alex's revelation and ending with the confrontation in the bedroom. She played the recording she'd made, watching Detective King's expression grow grim as Eric's words filled the kitchen. "Mrs. Patterson," the detective said when the recording ended, "I need you to understand that what happened tonight, the physical altercation, that's going to be investigated as a potential assault case. However, based on what I've heard and what we found so far, I believe we're looking at a clear case of self-defense." "What did you find?" Detective King hesitated, then said, "We found a hidden camera in Alex's room, as well as a locked box containing photographs and other materials. We'll need to have everything analyzed, but it appears to corroborate your son's account." Relief flooded through Irene, followed immediately by nausea. The evidence was real. This nightmare had actually happened. "Where's Alex now?" Detective King asked. "He's safe. He's with my friend Anna Rodriguez. I can give you her address." "Good. We need to interview him, but we have specialists trained to work with children. We'll make it as easy as possible for him." "What happens next?" "We build a case. With the evidence we've found, plus Alex's testimony and your recording, I'm confident we can get a conviction. Eric Morrison will never hurt another child." Detective King leaned forward, her expression compassionate. "Mrs. Patterson, I want you to know that you did everything right. You believed your son, you acted to protect him, and you fought back when you were threatened. Not every mother would have been that brave. But Irene didn't feel brave. She felt shattered, guilty, and terrified about how this would affect Alex. 6 months later, Irene sat in a courthouse, watching Eric Morrison being wheeled into the courtroom. The fall had left him paralyzed from the waist down, a fact his defense attorney was using to garner sympathy. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the defense lawyer said during his opening statement, "my client is already paying a terrible price for his alleged crimes. He will spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, unable to walk, requiring constant care. Is that not punishment enough?" But the prosecution, led by District Attorney Sarah Chun, was thorough and relentless. They presented the hidden camera footage, the photographs found in Eric's possession, and expert testimony about child abuse patterns. Most powerfully, they presented Alex's testimony. The court had been cleared of spectators when Alex took the stand. Only the judge, jury, lawyers, and essential personnel remained. Irene watched through a closed-circuit television in a separate room as her brave little boy, now 8 years old, answered questions with the help of a therapy dog named Chester. "Can you tell us about the games Eric wanted to play?" the prosecutor asked gently. Alex, his hand resting on Chester's soft golden fur, nodded. "They were scary games. Games that made me feel sick inside. He said they were normal, but I knew they weren't." "Did Eric ever threaten you?" "He said if I told, I would disappear forever. He said no one would ever find me." Alex's voice was steady, but Irene could see his small hand gripping Chester's fur tighter. "He said it would be my fault if Mommy got hurt. Are you afraid of Eric now?" Alex considered this carefully. "A little bit, but Mommy says he can't hurt me anymore. She says she'll always protect me." The defense attorney's cross-examination was brief and careful. Any attempt to attack a child victim too aggressively would backfire with the jury. But he did try to plant seeds of doubt. "Alex, isn't it true that you didn't like Eric very much? That you were jealous of the attention your mother gave him?" "I liked Eric at first," Alex replied honestly. "He was nice to me before the game started. I wanted him to be my dad. And when you realized he might become your stepfather permanently, you got scared, didn't you?" "I got scared when he hurt me," Alex said firmly. "Not before." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Eric Morrison guilty on all counts: child sexual abuse, child endangerment, possession of child pornography, and making terrorist threats. The judge sentenced him to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, Irene felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. Justice had been served. 2 years after the trial, Irene and Alex had built a new life in a different town. Irene had found work with a smaller insurance company, and Alex was thriving in fourth grade. He made friends, joined the school science club, and even convinced Irene to let him take karate lessons. "I want to be able to protect myself," he'd said, and she couldn't argue with that logic. The nightmares had gradually faded, though Alex still saw Dr. Sarah Martinez, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, once a month. Dr. Martinez had become not just Alex's therapist, but a family friend, helping both mother and son navigate the long road to healing. "He's doing remarkably well," Dr. Martinez told Irene during one of their regular check-ins. "Children are resilient, especially when they have strong support systems. Alex knows he's believed, he knows he's safe, and he knows it wasn't his fault. Those are the most important factors in recovery." "What about long-term effects?" Irene asked, a question that kept her awake at night sometimes. "There may be some," Dr. Martinez admitted. "He might have trust issues with authority figures, particularly men. He might be hyper-vigilant about his safety. But with continued therapy and your support, there's every reason to believe he'll grow up to be a healthy, well-adjusted adult." Alex had shown remarkable strength throughout the entire ordeal. He'd testified bravely. He'd answered countless questions from investigators and therapists, and he'd never once blamed himself for what happened. But perhaps most impressively, he'd found ways to help other children. When a classmate confided that her older brother was bothering her, Alex immediately told his teacher, who contacted Child Protective Services. When the school held an assembly about personal safety, Alex volunteered to share his story with his classmates, explaining that adults who ask you to keep secrets about touching are never safe adults. "You did the right thing telling your mom," he told his wide-eyed classmates. "Grown-ups are supposed to protect kids, not hurt them." Irene watched from the back of the school auditorium, tears streaming down her face, as her 9-year-old son transformed his trauma into a tool for protecting others. On a warm Saturday morning in May, Irene and Alex worked together in the small garden behind their new house. Alex had become fascinated with growing things, and they planted tomatoes, peppers, and a variety of flowers. "Mom," Alex said, carefully watering the seedlings they'd planted the week before, "do you think we'll ever see Eric again?" It was a question he asked periodically, and Irene always answered it honestly. "He's in prison for a very long time, sweetheart. Even if he gets out someday, he's not allowed to contact us or come near us. The judge made sure of that." "Good," Alex said matter-of-factly. "I hope he stays there forever. Are you still afraid of him?" Alex considered this, just as he always did when she asked. "Sometimes a little bit, but not as much as before. Dr. Martinez says it's normal to still feel scared sometimes, even when you're safe." Dr. Martinez is right. "And besides," Alex added, grinning up at her, "you beat him up pretty good that night." Irene laughed despite herself. "I did, didn't I? You were like a superhero. Like Wonder Woman, but scarier." As they worked in comfortable silence, Irene reflected on how far they'd both come. The trauma would always be part of their story, but it no longer defined their lives. They'd found their strength, their healing, and their peace. That evening, as she tucked Alex into his bed in their new home, he looked up at her with those serious dark eyes that had seemed too much too young, but somehow remained full of hope. "Mom." "Yes, baby. Thank you for believing me. And thank you for protecting me." Irene kissed his forehead, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and the lingering smell of sunshine from their afternoon in the garden. "Always," she whispered. "I will always believe you, and I will always protect you." As she turned off his light and headed toward her own room, Irene felt something she hadn't experienced in years: true peace. They had survived the unthinkable, faced their worst nightmare, and emerged stronger on the other side. The road ahead wasn't without challenges. There would be difficult conversations as Alex grew older and began to understand more fully what had happened to him. There would be moments of anger, grief, and fear that might surface unexpectedly. There would be the ongoing work of therapy and healing. But they would face it all together, as they always had. Mother and son, survivors and warriors, building a future filled with hope, trust, and unconditional love. The monster who had invaded their lives was behind bars, and the shadows he'd cast over their home had finally lifted. In their place stood something beautiful, a testament to the power of believing, protecting, and never giving up on the ones you love. Outside Alex's window, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, but tonight, they were safe, they were together, and they were free. And that was enough. This story is dedicated to all the brave children who find the courage to speak up, and to all the parents and caregivers who listen, believe, and act to protect them. In Alex's words, grown-ups are supposed to protect kids, not hurt them. And when they fail in that responsibility, it's our collective duty as a society to ensure justice is served and healing can begin. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends and loved ones. It motivates us to keep working on new stories every day. Don't miss the next amazing story that's about to appear on your screen. We're very grateful to have you with us. See you soon.